Hello, everyone. My name is Devin Rue. I'm a professional fantasy cartographer and illustrator in the tabletop RPG industry, as well as your host for the Quip and Quill podcast. Tell us who the fuck you are and what the fuck you do.
My name is Kelli. I'm mostly known as the Opera Geek because prior to the pandemic, I was a professional opera singer who was also a geek. I'm still a professional opera singer because I know the face that Devin's making right now. I'm still a professional opera singer. It's just pandemics made things a lot more difficult. So I'm also a content creator in the tabletop community. I am a player on a lot of different shows, and I am on the advisory board of Stream to End MS, which is the streaming arm of the National MS Foundation.
Yay! And yeah, I totally was making a face. How dare you?
I know you were. I can see you and Tanya in my head when I say things that are self-derogatory. Like, I can see your faces. It's great.
Good. I hope it's seared into your brain, and that every time you say something bad about yourself, you immediately want to take it back.
Okay.
I want to put the fear of Devin into you.
Oh man.
That sounded wrong, especially the way I said it, but
also right.
I mean, come on.
That can definitely go both ways there.
I mean, we just got done talking about going both ways.
I mean, yeah.
Honestly, anyone would be even remotely surprised by that. Again, I didn't actually ever come out. Everyone just automatically somehow knew that I was gay, so that's fine.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I think it's also important. I feel like because a lot of straight people can sometimes be a little unaware of this. So this is from me to everybody else that's straight. Just because you know doesn't mean it's yours to share.
Right, 100%. Regardless,
it's not yours to share.
Of anybody's information, whether they're transgendered, whether they're non-heterosexual, whether they are naturally have purple hair somehow, not your information to fucking share.
No, they do it on their own time for their own reasons, and you can't. You wouldn't want somebody to disrespect something that you found very important to yourself, so don't do that to other people. Straight person, PSA over.
There you go. Heterosexuality 101 right here.
Heterosexuality has left the chat.
Mm-hmm. Everything from here out will be pretty much on some level of gay.
As every time I play with Sam DeLev on anything, and I'll be like, let me get this straight. And they're like, oh no, we can't do that.
Right. You might be able to, but I'm not able to. Yeah. What's that? I'm so gay I can't even think straight.
Kind of, yeah.
How the fuck did you get into opera singing?
Well, so it requires a moderate backstory. So the backstory is that my father is a singer. He's a bass baritone, and he actually has a degree in vocal performance from Eastern Michigan University. Mm-hmm. But just as now, both the market, it's such an just incredibly competitive career, and it's an expensive career.
Right. To
try to get started. He didn't have the money, and so he joined the military to support my mom, and then eventually, my brother and me. Mm-hmm. And there's actually pictures of me. Well, it's not really of me. I'm there. You just can't see me. But there's pictures of him with his big old Pioneer headphones from the 80s, like on my mom's stomach, playing opera to me from the time. It's, and I always liked it. But I think the most important thing is to note in this story is that I was exposed to it at a very young age, which, like most art, if you expose children to it at a young age, it really can help inform their entire life. So, unfortunately, when he was serving overseas in a particular conflict, he technically an injury where his vocal cords hardened, so he can't sing as much. Right. Although I did find out on my trip 3 weeks ago that he joined the church choir, and let me tell you, I was so excited. I was so excited because so much of his life revolved around music and it was taken away.
Right.
And so to get a message from my dad saying, hey, can you tell me a good piano app for my phone so I can go through my music, was just like, it's hard to explain the emotions there. But so yeah, I listened to it from very, very young. All kinds of music was played in my house. And then when I was 13, my dad took me to see La Traviata on tour with what was then New York City Opera. Sidebar, I found out later that some of the people I was watching on that stage later became my colleagues in another opera, which was kind of fun. I mean, to me, that's great. So we went and saw that, and I desperately, I knew I wanted to be in theater. I wanted to be in musical theater, but I outgrew it, not emotionally, but physically, because, you know, there's a lot of height limits imposed for certain characters or casting, especially for women, because costumes are shared.
Right.
So there went my Phantom of the Opera dreams.
And how tall are you?
I'm 6 feet.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's
for those who don't know.
Yeah, it's like, I think I read somewhere that Christine is supposed to be no taller than 5'7" or something. But the most important thing is, and I'm not even sure there's a concrete thing. Right. The most important thing is she's not supposed to ever be taller than Raoul or the Phantom.
Right.
So between that and then my voice got bigger, and you know, you when your voice does something, that means that that's what it's comfortable doing.
Right.
And you can't force yourself to do something else. So I decided, you know, I'm gonna go and try to make this work, because I originally wanted to be a veterinarian, and sometimes I'm like, oh, a career that pays.
Right.
I've made terrible choices. But yeah, so I can't remember a time in my life when opera wasn't a part.
Right.
So it was never a matter of how did you get into it, more that it just kind of felt like a comfortable space for me to move into vocally.
Right.
And there are times, it's this very strange thing, and I'm not sure how many people will understand this. It's not so much regretting the choice you made to go do something like this instead of getting a job that would pay you. It's wishful thinking sometimes that this job would pay you.
Oh yeah, no, as another artist, I completely understand.
Yeah, so that's how that started, and for about 15 years I worked my butt off to you know, claw my way into the industry, and I had just managed to headline my first opera as the title character, and then COVID hit. I'm just like, really?
Of course, right? Doesn't it just feel like...
It feels personal.
Right, right. Like, what the absolute fuck?
Yeah, it's, so yeah, it's, and I'm trying not to lose too much hope that I'll ever be on a stage again.
Right.
It's hard to have hope right now because I can't even get people to hear me, and a lot of other singers are in the same boat because the industry was already bad before COVID.
Right.
Post-COVID, it's even worse. So,
yes.
But anyway, that's the long answer.
Right. I mean, that's what we're here for, aren't we? We're here for the long answer. So I actually want to talk about opera because you and I have, I believe we've had this discussion before, but I think one of the things that really irritates the fuck out of me whenever I see you on a show or you do anything vocally, whether you're streaming or, you know, whatnot, there's always some asshole that's like, I don't really like opera. Thanks.
Well, thank you, stranger. Opera doesn't like you either. Yeah, it's not for everybody. And I think the important thing that, especially in America, small soapbox, in America, you're never, from a young age, you're just basically given this idea of opera and movies and the arts as only for rich old white people and boring. Those are the two things that are, you know, shoved in your face. I'm here right now to tell you that there are a lot of boring operas. There are a lot of boring operas. There are a lot of operas I can't stand that I don't want to watch. But the important thing that a lot of people don't realize is that all opera does not sound the same.
Right.
It is not just by time period, but by composer. And I could pretty much bet money that for anybody that says, I don't like opera, I could find something that they liked. They just haven't found the right one. It's, I tend to use Mozart a lot as entry-level opera because even though Mozart is a very complicated composer, what the listener hears is not. It's got a very clean, almost like mathematically perfect sometimes tone, and that's a lot different than Wagner. Like, for God's sakes, don't start with Wagner.
I don't think any of them would even know what the fuck you're talking about. I mean, other than know the name Mozart.
And well, I mean, they'd know the horns on the head.
Okay,
that's Wagner,
Right, but that's what I mean.
It's really, it's exactly. It's and everybody knows Bugs Bunny. I'm sorry, if you've watched Bugs Bunny, you've watched opera.
Right. That was kind of what I was alluding to. Like, kill the rabbit. But yes, I think a lot of people don't realize how much they've actually already heard some opera.
Oh yeah, 100%. All the time. There was a car commercial a year or so ago that used the Queen of the Night aria that I sing, but it was slowed down to a romantic style pace and lowered several keys. And I was like, what in the what? There's all these other songs you could be using.
Right.
Why? It's also the story. You have to remember that this opera began as musical theater.
Yes.
It was the musical theater of its time, and Mozart actually did several that are called Singspiels, which is song plays, which is what Magic Flute is. So you have song and dialogue, song and dialogue. It was an entertainment specifically made in the current vernacular, in the local languages. It was for the public. It slowly became a rich person's thing because gentrification everywhere.
Right.
But it began as something for the masses to enjoy. It has been used as a political hammer. It has been used as a cultural hammer. All kinds of things. And so my response always is when somebody says, well, I really don't like opera. My first response is, which ones have you seen?
Right. To clarify as well. So a lot of, not all operas are in another language.
Nope.
You have, you as in the listener, not as in Kelly, you have been exposed to opera in so many different ways that are so subtle and in the background. And I know this because as a goth and somebody who really loves listening to heavy metal, there's a lot of opera in it.
Yeah.
A lot of opera.
By next year, there's going to be some more opera and heavy metal, but that's another story.
Oh, okay. Well, wonder what that's about. But the idea is everyone has this really stereotypical idea of a very large woman, singing Italian in a very high-pitched, note to whatever. And this is like the whole 5 seconds of that's their exposure to opera, and that is not the same. And I really want to point out that there is, yes, there is a difference as far as the music is concerned, but there isn't a difference between watching opera and watching basically things like Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same, people. It's just people singing
only
their
dirtier
lines. Yes, usually.
Opera's very dirty. People don't understand that.
Describe dirty before we lose people. You mean sexual, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. There's a lot of double entendres, especially in Mozart, because Mozart was obsessed
with sex.
Particular parts of sex. He wrote a poem and set it to music about licking someone's ass. I'm not even joking. It exists.
Ode to rimming. Yeah.
Pretty much. He's he was very he's a very awkward person, and but I mean, Mozart had an opera band, Marriage of Figaro, and it's because the plays that it's based on, the Beaumarchais plays, were also banned because of how it made the upper class seem. And by seem, I mean it actually showed what they do. Using your power wrong and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Treating people like things. One of the funniest examples to me of this is Don Giovanni, because it is, now I'm going to preface this with, this is an anecdote. I have not done the hard historical research for this, but this is what I have gathered over the years of performing. The end of Don Giovanni is horrifying in a great way. You know, he gets dragged down to hell, and that's how it ends. The nobility gets punished. It was commissioned by somebody who was of the noble class. So now Don Giovanni magically ends with a happy-go-lucky sextet telling about what they're all going to go do next.
As all good operas should.
Yeah, it does not end with Giovanni's punishment.
Right.
Opera is very political. You'll also hear the term oratorio. That's what the Messiah is, that everybody knows the Hallelujah chorus from. And that's because for a long time, the church had a stranglehold. I know it's shocking. I know, Devin, you had to just sit down.
Yep, I did.
The church had a stranglehold and ruled with an iron fist about what was proper and what was able to be shown. So an oratorio is just an opera with a religious theme, basically.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but a good chunk are the composer's writing still the same, just with a religious.
How did you get into RPGs then? Because I know because I'm theater adjacent, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, okay, you mean to tell me there's a bunch of tabletop players running through the opera world?
Yes, there are, actually.
I know.
There's a ton. And there's more every time I get my hands on somebody. Because at one point we were going to do a whole D&D night at the Merry Widow, where I was going to teach people how to play D&D. So I have always loved fantasy. I have always loved reading fantasy and imaginative pursuits.
Right.
And so I read Forgotten Realms books way before I ever played D&D, because while I liked the idea of D&D, I so uncool that even the D&D kids didn't want to hang out with me, basically.
No. I feel that in my bones.
Yeah. Like if you went back in time and told, 14-year-old me eating my lunch in the theater hallway because, I didn't want to be around the people who made fun of me so much. If you went back and told her, hey, you're going to make money playing games, I'd be like, go away. You're a liar, dirty liar.
By the way, I would be that kid in school that would have absolutely just joined you because I could.
Oh yeah, there were a few.
Yeah.
There were a few, and you treasure those kind of relationships.
I found out people thought I was cool when I was in high school. I thought that was hilarious. I was like, what?
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I had to interrupt.
Find out about people afterwards. So basically, I read about it. I knew about it, but never played. My technical first D&D game I ever played was in 2006, right after my best friend got married. She's married to one of my husband's childhood best friends. Justin DM'd a one-shot for us. That was the first time I ever got to play. That's also when I got told, maybe don't choose Paladin ever again. And I have to this day, he won't actually tell me if the people I killed were bandits. I mean, they obviously were. They were on the side of the road, and I was totally going to donate all of that jewelry to the church. What's interesting to me is the way I got into public-facing RPG was, and mind you, by the way, along with the reading and everything else I was playing, when I finally got a game system, which took a long time, that's a whole nother story, I was playing all the RPGs. The stories are what make me happy. It actually started with a gentleman who had a channel that's unfortunately defunct now. He had put out a random question. I don't even know how it came across my feed on Twitter. And I didn't assume nobody was going to see it because I think I had like 12 followers. But I answered him. His question was, people in theater, do you find that preparing a character for on stage is similar to creating a character for tabletop? So I answered it, which I was like, yeah, it's similar in that it's the same thing. It's, if anything, a character sheet can give a performer a great checklist of things to know about your character. I mean, obviously you're going to do your research because there's always research involved when you're doing opera, research, translation, everything else. But you go about it the same way. You're going to find something that you have in common with the character. You're going to build what's the backstory, what's this, what happened before they walk on stage. So Shane then invited me to stream a one-shot, and I declined because I was too worried about making mistakes and people, making fun of me. And so that was in 2017, right before I went down to do Magic Flute. And as I was about to leave for Magic Flute, my husband was like, hey, you need to look up this podcast. I think you'd really like it. It's called Critical Role. So I did. And what I found so phenomenal, especially in campaign 1, but still now, is that they routinely mess up. They routinely get rules wrong. It gave me a little bit more confidence of, what, maybe I should try this. So the next time when I'd gotten home, Shane asked me again, do you want, can you come do a one shot? And I was like, sure. So I came and I did that one shot, and that led into me being on a permanent show on his channel, which was it had such a great cast. It was such a great premise. And unfortunately, like most everything, because tabletop players quite often, this isn't our job, like our day job. Eventually it just kind of falls by the wayside because of scheduling and everything else.
Which is, by the way, how you and I became friends.
It is, actually.
Yeah. Because I too was on the Greyhawk channel.
Yeah, and you also bought me my first dice.
Yes.
My first physical dice, Devin bought me.
Yeah. Because I feed everyone's addictions. Sorry, go ahead.
You do. Yeah, so that's I don't know what happened, really. It just...
You're right.
It just did. I know that I got a lot of attention, probably for all the wrong reasons, when I did a game that had Matt Mercer in it.
Right.
And I was specifically brought in to kill him, his character. But, looking back, as with all of us, we look back on the first things we do and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Like, why would I do that?
Because it was fun, and it's just a game.
Yeah, but you also know what I'm talking. For people who don't know what I'm talking about, I when I went to kill Matt, I said, now how do I want to do this? And he did laugh, so at least I have that.
Right.
I don't think he hates me.
I don't think he hates you either.
I've never met him, so I don't know. But yeah, and so then it kind of kept getting bigger. And that year when I went to PAX Unplugged for the first time, I met the lovely Hannah Rose, who took a joke thread I had started about if there was a subclass for opera for bards, because I'm salty that the voice is not included in the instrument list still.
That's why we make our own. Fuck that shit. They're never going to do it for us.
So Hannah was like, this is feasible. We could make this happen. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. So we did. And we published it on the DMs Guild like weekend after Christmas or something. And I was going away to Pennsylvania to see my best friend. And there's like crappy reception. Plus you're with your friends for a few days after the release. And by the time I was back, it was already platinum.
Nice.
And to my eternal chagrin and still my bit of annoyance, several major opera companies posted about it, and not one of them has ever accepted any of my applications to sing for them. So I'm like, guys, really?
Right.
Okay, that's another story. Never mind. Anyway, as Sondheim would say. So then after the College of the Opera came out, it was a very strange, sudden influx of people knowing who I was.
Right.
I started meeting some amazing people in the community. Devin, V, Crafting Muse, who remains incidentally. So Crafting Muse doesn't do a lot of videos on creation anymore, but she used to do a ton of like terrain videos. she was doing a class at PAX-U, that first PAX-U I went to, where she was teaching how to make this particular terrain thing. And so what she did, because, you know, I always joke that I'm going to eat the dice or I'm going to do this or that. She made me an edible terrain that we swapped out at the last minute, because I was sitting there up front painting with her. And then at the last minute, we swapped it out. And in front of the whole class, I took a bite out of it. And I had such a sugar high, because that thing was made out of like confectioner's sugar, Kit Kats, caramel, coconut.
Oh,
Like,
you're making me hungry.
I was, Scotty, hold on. Unfortunately, there's dog aggro. Come here, bud.
It's okay. So what we're going to talk about is, well, she's gone. We have a sponsor now. Almost spinster? What the fuck? We have a sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to do like a Sam thing. This combat is brought to you by Legend Keeper.
Jeez. Hi, is that all you wanted? You just wanted to be up in a lap? Okay.
Yeah. This Scotty moment this Scotty interruption is brought to you by Legend Keeper.
I mean, honestly, the thing that I like to say at this point now is I have made more playing my dog in Dungeons and Dragons than I have made in the last like year and a half than I've made in the last 5 years of singing opera.
I mean, first off, we all love our cutie fur babies. Like,
yeah.
I love how much a lot of us incorporate our animals into not only into our channels, into our social media. I actually sort of stopped doing it recently because unfortunately I lost one of my babies. And it's just been really, really hard for me. So but I love seeing everyone else's, and sometimes playing our fur babies is much more fun than playing us.
Yeah. I feel like there's also a reason that a lot of people who struggled both with mental health and with loneliness and with being bullied and everything else, that pipeline goes to theater kid and tabletop, because a lot of the time we just want to be anybody else but ourselves.
Right.
I mean, that's still me.
or changing us into something. Like,
exactly.
I don't necessarily, because there's a lot of us who technically don't want to be somebody other than ourselves, but more of like an extension of ourselves, be even more, whatever. Us with a superpower.
Yeah, it's like when people say, oh, how much is your online personality like your personality? The answer is it's the same. It's just that people that know me online or know me from online, they're only getting part of the personality. You don't get the full thing, and that goes into a whole thing on parasocial relationships. But yeah, it's and the other thing Matt and I had in common, incidentally, is that we both had terrible speech impediment as a kid, and that's actually how I started singing, was because I could not get a sentence out. Right. Because my stutter was so bad. So my grandmother just started making me sing everything to her. And as soon as I started singing, I had no stutter.
Right.
And she knew it because of, like, what was his name? Mel Torme, the performer who had a terrible stutter.
Yes.
And then when he sang, no stutter. Yeah. So, theater, I can't overemphasize how much theater and the arts is so much more than just a play you see on a stage. It does so much more.
It's so much more than wanting attention or wanting people to notice you. As a matter of fact, technically, there's a lot of people that are like me who get into theater and arts and everything else and don't want to be seen. Yeah. I don't want to be on stage. I love creating sets. I love creating props. I love creating stories. I don't want to be on stage. I'm not doing it for attention. I don't want you to know who I am.
But it gives you, the joy it gives you is the same. And
yes,
it's the feeling of creating a better world than the one you've got.
It's being able to tell stories that other people wouldn't ever have an opportunity to experience or be a part of, and to draw them in and let them experience things firsthand along with the characters.
Exactly. And, you never know what somebody in the audience is going through. They could be watching you, and that could be their only happy moment throughout the day. That's something I try to bring to my streaming games when I stream tabletop stuff, and even when I do my video games, because it's so important for people to be able to have a space like that, to go to, because there's a lot of us that didn't. The internet has made a huge difference for people who are neurodivergent, who have mental health issues, who were the loner kid who could never find something to find in common with other people, but suddenly you have access to the whole world. Like, I can't imagine what it would have been like.
I can. I can. I'm pre-internet. I'm old enough to be pre-internet.
Yeah, me too. That's the thing. It's like, I can't imagine what it would have been like had I had it.
Right. Oh yeah, no. Yes and no, because I still think that we haven't gotten yet to the place where we have a global language.
No.
And so I have a friend of mine who is a linguist, and I love it because he and I have is
he a very cunning linguist?
He is a very cunning linguist. He actually has a master's degree in a bunch of letters after his name. And he loves that joke, by the way. But no, he's a couple years older than I am. And we've had conversations about, like where the internet is now and how much different it was when, it first started, and what our childhoods would have been like. Because I've made a joke about, especially when I first wanted to start this podcast, about my muchness, which you and I have had hilarious fucking conversations that are just so over the top.
Oh, yeah. Like woo! Like, what?
And oddly enough, I was really worried about it when I started this podcast, but it turned into something different where my muchness still isn't the spotlight, which makes me super happy, because I do tend to wear on people's nerves, and I'm aware of it. I just don't necessarily care as much as I probably should. I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just, I love who I am as a person, so I don't curb who I am to appease other people. I just am also aware that it's not exactly for everybody. In high school and stuff like that, or in grade school, I grew up in extenuating circumstances, and I couldn't ever discuss my home life. So everything I did was sort of like being, on stage.
A different person, yeah.
Yeah, just so people would not ask me anything about my home life. And that just sort of fed into me just being over the top.
Yeah, and it just keeps going. It's like a snowball.
Oh, yeah. And so we were talking about, what life would have been like, growing up with that. And he's like, the only problem we have now is that we haven't gotten to a point where we have a global language. And I was, what the fuck? So he's like, we have general terms and we're getting there now. And a lot of it actually just starts off with things like LOL or, he's like, all of those little abbreviations are helping us, even if we don't speak the same language, we're getting certain things that are coming across. And he's like, by the time that we actually have a genuine internet-based global language, all of the things that we grew up with that were so isolating is going to be very different. Not necessarily better, because there's still cyberbullying, there's still trolls, there's still people who want the...
in some ways, that's gotten worse with the internet.
Yes. And it's whether or not we have social media that learns how to stop worrying about a bottom line and start worrying about people, or holding people accountable, or it all depends on where our global society shifts. But it was really interesting because he pointed out how many of us, because he's like, you deal with it on such a daily basis, because he loves to follow my socials. He's like, a perfect example is you have one extreme or the other. You have people that absolutely love you, love your work, and follow you, and literally hang on every word you say. Like the second I post something, there's like a handful of people that instantly like every post I make. And at times it used to freak me out a little. Why are you so in tune to whatever I'm typing? But in the same context, I have people that just jump on every opportunity to tell me how horrible I am.
Yeah, it's that, and that's never going to stop.
No. No, but we will hopefully get to the point where we stop it, or we stand up for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we don't have now.
No, there's, in
a non-combative way, people. Nobody go telling other people to hurt themselves or other people.
No. That's a conversation I was actually just having with my therapist today about the people that try to use assault as a revenge thing. Like, don't do it.
Right.
It's, sure, some people are probably never going to change. There's probably always going to be people that are going to be shitheads and do everything they can to degrade women, minority, LGBTQ, or really anybody that's not just like them. What's great is I think that the internet has brought together those people, but it's also brought together all the people that say, no, we're not going to let this stand. It's brought together the people that will put themselves, in between the target and the person making fun of them. And I think that's an interesting thing. My husband and I have had the conversation before about, do you think humanity is basically good or basically evil? And he is definitely on the side of humanity is basically good, that people, if given the opportunity, will do the right thing. I'm a bit more ambivalent on that.
This world would be so much worse if the majority of humanity wasn't good.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of his arguments.
Yeah.
And, of course, he can also back it up with scientific studies because there have been studies into it.
Yes.
One of the other things I think, too, that can't be stressed enough is that tabletop games also give you the space to explore the parts of you that terrify you, or to explore the situations that have terrified you in the past. And it allows you to do it in a safe way because there's no real world harm happening, but you also get very involved in your characters. So quite often you're getting to understand, if you had made those choices or whatever else. I mean, for God's sakes, I can't even make Gail feel bad.
Right?
I can't even make Gail feel bad. I'm like, I feel also that I owe an apology to Tim Downey because people kept donating during the MS stream, and I was already like everywhere at once because I don't DM really, and so I was DMing publicly and I was terrified.
Right.
Tanya DePass, the agent of destruction, paid money to have Gail show up in Avernus to fight a goose. So the way I introduced Gail was I had him falling out of the sky, landing on the ground dead, and then popping up with, "Hello, I'm Gale of Waterdeep."
I mean,
this little illusion.
Right.
And I was like, I am not going to spout the entire thing that that Gale's hologram does, but and it's towards the end of there, somehow Geralt of Rivia and Gale of Waterdeep became really good friends in the background. Like, nice. really, really, really good friends. Tanya was just like, Gale and Geralt are making out in the corner.
I'm here for it.
I was like, I mean, okay. Yeah. But yeah, I was joking. I was like, man, I have all this respect for these voice actors, and then the first time I get a hold of one of their characters, I murder him. But why not?
Yeah, but it's their characters,
Yeah. And I mean, bless them playing D&D with Mark Humes, because that was hilarious.
Yes. Oh my God, that was a riot.
I can't get over watching Neil be the only person who knew that it was Drist that was getting described. and like pointing and going, ah!
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think the other ones had ever played D&D, right?
No. So but watching that, because that's that feeling that all of us get when something comes up and we're in character and we're like, I know that, but my character doesn't know that.
Right. Oh, and I can't say, I mean, I can, but my character can't, but yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, but I was just like, Tim Downey, I am so sorry for this. And, then I pointed out later, I have never once apologized to Doug for butchering Geralt of Rivia. Never once.
I don't think you have to. I think the way that Doug is,
he loves it.
Right. I was going to say he just kind of seems to live for it. So I don't think there's any apology.
Oh, he does. He is absolutely like, and the apology to Tim Downey, of course, is facetious. I don't actually think he'd be mad at me, for anybody who's listening.
Because you just never know. I have a weird podcast that probably, I think maybe 50 people have listened to a single episode so far.
I mean, hey.
Hey, it's better than I thought,
I've never apologized to Doug. And I have to say this about Doug Cockle, who, for people listening, he is the voice of Geralt of Rivia, as well as just a phenomenally talented actor in a lot of other things, including Band of Brothers, which I didn't know. It's that thing where I have to walk the fine line between being a fan and a friend, because we've become very good friends, Justin and I and Doug.
Yeah.
And I explained to him, I was like, listen, just because I'm your friend now, which I adore and I love our friendship, doesn't mean I'm not your fan anymore. Like, I am a fan of you. Let me go do this terrible thing to your character. I mean, I had him arrest himself last year, and this year I was going to make him kill himself. I was going to make his bunny. He had a Haragon. I can't remember how to pronounce that. Oh, the bunny person.
Yeah,
I was going to make. I brought in Geralt as another donated boss fight, and instead they all rolled super high to convince Geralt to join them, and that's how Geralt and Gale ended up making out in the back. I don't even know.
It seems completely plausible. I'm here for that.
I was like, I apologize to everybody that paid for boss fights, because not a single one of them got finished.
Well, you don't know if they got finished. They might have off in the corner.
That's true. It's dark over there.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
But what it is about Doug that is so phenomenal is that it's so easy to be both his fan and his friend.
Right.
He puts you directly at ease, and I have found this with a lot of actors, voice actors, celebrities, that and celebrities, I'm doing the air quotes, you can't see me, but I'm doing the air quotes. So many people hold the people they're a fan of up on a pedestal and forget they're a person. And I have been wonderfully surprised at how many of the people that I admired and was a fan of just turn out to be great people.
Right.
Like, case in point, I'm on Devin's podcast.
Oh, please.
No, don't. Excuse you.
Bitch, please.
No. Devin gets weird about compliments, so I'm not going to be fulsome in my compliments.
I get weird about compliments. I get weird about fame.
Yeah.
For two reasons, though. One, fame is relative.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But the other thing is, I am that person. I do want to be the person who's building the sets and building props and feeding, everyone else their lines or whatever. Like, I love being a team player and the person behind the scenes, and as much personality as I do have, that's just a non-performative thing. So whenever someone's like, "Oh my God, you're famous," I'm like, not really.
Yeah,
my art is, and that's the difference.
Yeah,
like,
and
you're a performer, and performers can be famous, but when you're an artist, it's your art that's famous, and it's a slightly different.
Yeah, it is.
Dynamic.
And for me, I don't always equate being a fan of someone as that person has to be famous.
Right.
Like, but when I first joined the space, when I first joined the space, you were one of the first people I followed. Like, I was in awe of your skill, because I have no physical art skill. I can't do anything like that. I was in awe of your skill. And yet here I am, like, I thought I was never, that you wouldn't even follow me back. And yet here I am, 4 years later, sitting and shooting the shit with you on a podcast.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of gratifying to have that experience with people. Now, that does not mean that I don't act like an absolute weirdo when somebody that I super admire follows me or says something to me. Oh, I act like a total weirdo.
Oh, absolutely.
I fell off my chair when Marisha Ray followed me on Twitter. I did.
So before I ever worked with like Matt Mercer, because he was the first one in Critical Role to follow me. Mm-hmm. So here's a funny thing. My first whatever, I don't even know what to call it. I had Will Wheaton like and share one of my map posts of me drawing a map, and that is way before Critical Role and everything else, and I lost my shit over it because immediately following that post I had like Chris Perkins follow me and a bunch of other people in the industry that I was like, why are you following me?
I know. And it's that permanent neurodivergent feeling. And I've so far found that it is a very blanket thing. I'm sure there are plenty of people that it doesn't apply to, but almost everybody I know who's also neurodivergent has that thing of, oh God, like, but they haven't said anything now. So, oh my God, maybe they're mad at me. That kind of thing.
Right.
I'm like, no.
That's a great topic.
It's a whole ass topic.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I distinctly remember, and I have to pull the tweet up at some point. I won't tag him in. I never tag these people in things because that's also a branch out from are they mad at me? It's, oh, I don't want to bother them.
Right.
One of the tweets I did when I was playing Shadow of War the first time, not when I streamed it, but I hadn't realized, and that was way before, obviously, I was playing tabletop. I hadn't realized until later that Matt had voiced the Lich King of Angmar.
Yes.
Witch King, not Lich King. Anyway. And so after I did the performance, the stream where I was brought in as a character to kill his character, like, this story. I knew he followed me, but I just assumed he didn't actually follow. You kind of assume that it's like a tangential thing,
right. Like they're not going to actually read your posts. They're just following you because you're part of the community.
Yeah, they do. They do. Trust me.
100%.
Yeah. And oddly enough, I've now been on the other end of that. But yeah, so I posted, this wasn't even the first time I killed Matt because I killed the Witch King of Angmar like a bitch.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like 20 minutes after I posted it, I just got a little tear emoji from Matt as a reply. And I was like, oh, God.
And that, like...
He probably thought it was hilarious, but, you know, I was like, oh, shit. And it's when that happens, and it's kind of the way I met Doug. Followed Doug, obviously, because I'm a huge Witcher fan. Responded to a few of the things, and then I don't even remember exactly what happened. I was like, when did Doug Cockle follow me back? I was like, okay, that's weird. And then this just really goes to show people the kind of person Doug is. Like, I had posted that I was in the hospital. I hate hospital waiting rooms. I hate them. And I am unfortunately very familiar with them because of Justin. Mm-hmm. And he has to have all these tests done constantly every year for MS. And not that his MS went away. Just to clarify for people, it's not that, magically he went away. They're testing him to see, oh, do you have MS? No, it's to test to see if it's advanced at all. I got a notice in my inbox, and Doug had seen that I was in a hospital waiting room, and he wanted to check on me. And that's how I ended up talking to Doug for the first time.
That is very sweet.
because as it turns out, his mother had MS. So, you know, he's been behind the Stream to End MS trumpet, like, fanfare since the beginning. So he was just like, listen, I know that it's horrible. You know, I just wanted to check, make sure you're okay. I was like, what? It's what?
Right.
And yet I've had that experience with so many people, both in the opera and the tabletop space.
When you're the person on the other side of that, it's just you being you.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to, especially, because I've had this conversation.
And I've been on the other side of that now, which is still weird to me.
Right.
But I get what you're saying.
Right. It's, you know, like, you're just like, oh, you know, this is just me being me. And, you know, you don't ever think about the, how much impact that has on somebody else.
And that just one kind gesture can change things for people. And like, a good example of this is, you know, growing up, I was diagnosed with what was then called ADD, which is kind of a defunct diagnosis at this point. But I was diagnosed after my parents fought so hard to get me the help I needed because they knew I was different. And and not just in the, you know, oh, we're her parents and so she's the best child in the world. They never had it was never about that. It was, she's different, there's something she's struggling with and we want to get her help. So I was diagnosed back when they thought only boys could have it.
Right. I forgot.
Like, that was, I literally, like, right now am touching the stack of my childhood records that my mom kept that she sent up to me. Which is just, she kept every evaluation, she kept everything this teachers ever wrote, everything. For a very long time, I felt that hard stigma that so many people with mental health and neurodivergence feel, where it's like, you can't let that out. You have to keep that quiet. You can't tell anybody. In a move that, of course, will totally surprise Devin due to stubbornness. I know it's going to be a surprise. When I was 13, I took myself off my ADHD medication because I thought I should be able to do it myself, which is a very toxic mindset. Yeah, it's a very toxic mindset, which, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, I can see. A small sidebar to that, people said, well, I can't believe your parents let you. And I said, listen, my parents made a deal with me. They'd let me get off the medication, but they were going to watch me to make sure that, you know, it didn't become overwhelming or anything else. But my parents always taught me this thing called bodily autonomy, meaning that I had a say in it.
You had some great parents.
My parents, I am so lucky with. My dad now is obviously not a combat medic now, but he was a combat medic and trauma nurse. You know, they would never have said, no, you know, you're going to force you. When I first went on it, of course, you're always going to have that feeling at first where you're like, no, I don't want to. But having that I don't want to do it thing is a lot more different than telling someone you have to do this.
Right.
It's a completely different thing. But anyway, so I was unmedicated for 24 years, something like that. I can't even remember. At this point. And the whole time I didn't discuss it with anybody because, you know, it's such a stigma, especially in the United States. It's funny how that got into my head because my parents certainly never made me feel that way. But it's just what you absorb from the media that you consume. From
society. Yep.
Exactly. From societal pressure. And so I remained unmedicated until after my husband had his first MS attack because every coping mechanism I had created for myself failed. Right. Just got ripped out from under me. And he encouraged me. He's like, listen, you know, you can't take care of me, which is what you seem to be hyper fixated on. if you can't take care of yourself. One day after I had started openly discussing my mental health and my differing diagnoses, and I openly was sharing about it and how it is a struggle, and I was tired of, you know, trying to hide that part of me. I got a note in my, like, the other inbox on Twitter.
Right.
And I open it up and it's just somebody saying that they had made the choice to go to therapy because they saw that I wasn't ashamed. And that kind of floored me because it was just a tweet, and yet it changed somebody. It changed the course of what they were going to do. So all this is to say, you never know how your actions are going to impact someone else.
No. And it doesn't matter if you are perceived as famous or talented or skilled or anything else. Sometimes it just takes someone else putting words to your feelings to make a world of difference.
That's what I feel as a performer a lot of times, especially singing. Sometimes there aren't words to express how you feel. There's not words, but music can help you. Drawing can help you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one of the greatest compliments I have ever received was somebody saying to me that was on the committee that I won the Tampa Bay Theater Award for. He said the thing that made it different is from the minute you walked out on stage, you made everybody in the audience feel like they were your friend.
Yeah.
And I almost lost it. Like, I'm not crying, but I'm having a moment at the moment thinking about it, because that man has no idea that I grew up with barely any friends.
Right.
You know, so to have someone tell me that and know that I gave that feeling to someone else is really, it's beyond words. It's beyond words. And I say one of my favorite compliments because honestly, still, as much as I am not a quote unquote kid person,
mm-hmm.
Kids are the most honest critics you'll ever have.
Fuck yes.
So if a kid enjoys it, you're doing something right.
Right?
I always go out into the lobby if I'm allowed in costume after a show for a variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And after Magic Flute, the costume I wore for that flute was absolutely stunning. It was over 20 pounds of costume. But when you pair that with my height, the fact that I'm carrying a knife around and singing these, very aggressive, the second act Queen of the Night song is very aggressive.
Right.
And at one point I'd looked down and there was this little girl in the front row who's probably about 5 or 6, maybe 6. And, her eyes were just gigantic. And so I go out to the lobby, one reason being to show, kids that, hey, it's not real. And I had backed myself into a corner because if you've seen the picture of me from Flute, I had paniers, which are the big giant hip extensions that they wore in the 17th century, or 18th century. It was easier for me to back into a corner and just stand there. I look past the people I'm talking to at the moment and I see this little girl with her mom. So I tried to make myself as small as possible, which 6 feet and 23 pounds of costume. And with the crown, I was 7 feet tall.
Oh yeah.
And so I got, all the way down as far as I could get. And she took like a couple steps towards me. And her mom's like, she wants to take a picture with you, but she doesn't want to be near you. And I was like, that is an amazing compliment. Thank you. Yeah. And I got her to come close enough to me because of course, I'm like, okay, my name's Kelly, but I'm like, most people wouldn't hear that as a compliment, but I'm like, that's a compliment because that kid believed what I was doing. Because kids, if they don't like you, they will let you know.
Oh, yes, they will. For those who don't know, I used to do children's parties.
Oh, God.
Yeah, a very, very long time ago. I am a natural platinum blonde, and I used to have really, really long blonde hair. I got hired by a company who wanted me to play Barbie. Which, let me tell you, I do not have that personality. So,
you don't say.
I definitely got some, I know, right? How weird. And that's not to say, because, Barbie is whatever you want to make it. I just mean that for most people cannot picture me being very kid-friendly.
Mm-hmm.
They would not be wrong.
Kids on a case-to-case basis as individual specimens can be great.
Right. Well,
but, in general.
I put on a costume and became a different person.
It's almost like putting on armor.
Yes. And the dress that we had was the biggest, pinkest, fucking glittery thing. God. you have ever seen. And it was so large. It was so large that so I had to show up in costume. I couldn't change there. And I had a car at the time. I actually had to buy a bigger car to be able to do this. But I had to take all the petticoats and everything else out from underneath it because I couldn't sit in the car and see over my dress.
Yeah, that's my wedding dress was similar. Yeah,
right.
and I with the Queen of the Night dress, it was a historically accurate dress,
right.
so it's not a one piece. The overskirt is attached via hoops and like I know you know, but just to explain to people, like it's got hooks and buttons under in the inside of the corset. So you become very friendly with the costume lady who's got her hand down your boobs, trying to fasten it. But in between the arias, because the Queen of the Night has the two best arias in the entire show, in my opinion, but she has an hour and a half in between. I would drop the overskirt and just be running around like the complete weirdo I am in that giant crown, the high boots, the giant cape, corset, and yoga pants. The costume makes the character.
Oh yeah, and I would show up and I would be Barbie. I would have tea parties with these kids, and it was great. My favorite was almost every parent was like, they listened to you. Like from the moment I showed up until I left, I had their absolute attention, and they did everything I said. And it was great because like I would get fantastic tips and everything for it. But let me tell you, if a kid didn't like you or didn't believe you were Barbie, boy, did you know.
Oh, yeah.
I had to sit down so many times and explain that, first off, which I love that they did this with the movie, that all the Barbies are Barbie. Because that was my explanation back then, was like, hey, listen, just because you have Malibu Barbie doesn't mean that I'm not a Barbie. You know, we're all named Barbie, and I just happen to be a very different, I happen to be Tea Time Barbie. And like, there is no Tea Time Barbie. Oh, not yet.
Well, there is now, kid.
Yeah, not yet. But, if you're really good, you might find out that there's a Tea Time Barbie in your future. And that's all I would say. And I have no idea if they ever remembered. Hopefully I never got any parents yelled at, but... As always, our show is sponsored by Legend Keeper, a fantastic world-building tool, whether you're a writer, a GM, DM, or even a player. You can create a world, you can add all of your notes, you can determine who gets to see them, edit them, create their own. And if you own a project, you are the only person who has to have a subscription, so you can bring your players in for free, or your readers or your patrons. You can determine who can edit, who can see, who can view secrets. And there are so many really interesting tools on Legend Keeper that allow you to link pages, maps, images, sidebars, timelines, calendars, like you name it. There's so much about Legend Keeper that is so simple and yet incredibly effective.
Do not tell, another soapbox moment, tell a caregiver or spouse of someone who has a disability how brave it is that they stayed with them.
Oh, you already know this is a huge peeve of mine.
Oh, I know, because I would get it when people find out Justin has MS. Go, oh, well, how long were you married before? Did he have it when you were first married? No, we were married about 15 years. Not 15 years. No, 10 years, 11 years. When he got diagnosed, it's like, oh, you're so brave to stay with him. What? No. Love. It's called love. I don't. What? But don't say that to people about staying with their disabled partner, because love is not conditional on your body working properly.
Right. Exactly. And it's also not to say that there wasn't issues with the relationship beforehand, or that they put themselves believing that they would have to sacrifice everything in order to take care of their partner, or that they didn't go out and find the right tools in order to continue a relationship with somebody who is disabled. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I got together with my wife. I have been partially blind since I was born. My eyesight has gotten worse over my lifetime because that's just what happens with my condition. There's a very high chance that I will end up completely blind in possibly 10 years. Who the fuck knows? Actually, that isn't true anymore. My diagnosis has changed because my eyesight and my good eye is still pretty good. So, but when her and I got together 15 years ago, I was like, this is still a very good possibility. Because at the time, it was still degenerating. Unfortunately, in the bad eye, it still is, which means that it's going to be completely blind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I forgot what the fuck they told me how long. It doesn't matter. I don't see out of it, so I don't really care.
That's kind of what it's kind of what Justin does.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, whatever. If it goes, it goes. It doesn't really, won't change my day to day. But I gave her the right tools on how to be involved in a relationship with somebody who's partially blind, as well as other things that I have physically wrong with me. Or I shouldn't say that. I hate the word wrong. I just don't know the word. I hate saying disabled too, because I am a able passing person for the most part. I do have a pretty bad spinal injury, or two of them, I should say, and a bad knee. Some days I'm great. I look like I could probably run a marathon. Most days I am not. And I have an immune disorder.
And the same with Justin. If you don't see him from the front with his eye patch.
Right.
Yeah, I heard a woman behind us say something, because, we were walking down the restaurant bar strip, saying something about how, disgustedly going like, oh, some people can't hold their drink because he's stumbling. He hadn't drank.
Right.
And I wanted to start a fight, but I was told not to. But anyway, continue.
My wife has had to not start swinging at people as well, because I do, unfortunately. Most people, especially when I was a kid, because I do lack sight in one of my eyes, most people just assumed that I was very klutzy. As opposed to the fact that I just can't see, and the whole right side of my body is like prone to walk into shit. Because I think I've cleared it, and I don't, because when you only have one eye, you lack depth perception.
Yeah, that's boy, that can also turn into some hilarious moments. Because you have to find the humor in the situation, or you go, you just spiral. That does not mean, lovely listeners, that outsiders in the relationship can also make fun.
No.
But
so here's the thing. I've had people like walk up and like, oh my God, your wife is so amazing to be with you, and literally act like I've had somebody ask her, or more than one person, I should say, what she's had to sacrifice or what she's had to give up. And my wife's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I know.
Just because somebody is any form of disabled or other-bodied or other-abled, or however you want to phrase it, just because they are, doesn't mean that the people that they're with, living with, in a relationship with, whatever, has to sacrifice anything. Like, the thing that my wife has ever really had to do that is just so different is I can't hold her hand while we're out in public, because I have to hold her arm. Because she's my seeing eye wife.
Yeah,
But
it may or may not have been cheaper than actually getting the dog.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's much more fashionable. I don't have to worry about if the dog goes to the bathroom. I can't see it, so oh well. I mean, I have my cane and everything else as well, so I'm independent. But it is hilarious to have people act as if, oh my God, you have sacrificed so much. Oh, you must love them so much. Well, yes, but it has nothing to do with me being disabled. Like, and that is beyond rude.
It's incredibly rude. It's making so many assumptions.
Right.
And
we already have that stigma in society. We don't
Exactly.
need people to add to it.
And from the caregiver standpoint, too, because it took a long time for me to even refer to myself as Justin's caregiver, because most of the time he's 100% able to do what he needs to do. It's becoming more frequent that things happen, but I mean, that's what MS does to you. It took me a long time to refer to myself as a caregiver until, his doctor pointed out, but you are.
Yes.
So don't say those kind of things to the caregiver, because are there what an outside person to the relationship might deem sacrifices that are made? Yes. Does that mean we consider them as sacrifices? No. Perception is totally different when you're inside. If anything, the hardest part for me is seeing him in pain, knowing I can't do anything.
Yes. And here's the thing, every relationship has that. Every relationship, whether the person is fully able or not, has some form of personal sacrifice of your space, of your time, of your friendships, of you have to compromise everything anyhow. Like, so we moved
it's
into
all
this,
compromise. Yeah.
Yes. We moved into this house and I started posting the things that I do for accessibility. And we had a friend that asked my wife what she had, what she has changed, or, like, how does she have to live any differently because of my disability? And my wife's like, not really. Like, because my wife doesn't dress me. She doesn't have to pick out my clothes. Like, all the things that are accessibility are for me. Yeah. So the only thing that my wife has to do, which I would assume that you would have to do this anyhow if you were living with a fully sighted person, is just not randomly move furniture in people's walkway.
Yeah, it's little tiny things that you have to do or remember to do.
She had to get used to the fact that I don't turn any lights on. I think that was the funniest thing. Like, she just kept asking me for the longest time, like, why are you in the dark? Because I don't need a light.
Yeah, it's it's all the little tiny things that, especially with an immune disorder, which a lot of people think MS is purely neurological. It is an autoimmune disorder. Yes, it just attacks the nerves. As his doctor told me once, if it was in your joints, we'd call it rheumatoid arthritis. Yes. But it's a fine line to walk, because your partner that you adore, you see them struggling sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you have to let them struggle. Yes. Sometimes you have to, there was quite a bit of time, and I'm still guilty of it occasionally, where I will try to do everything for Justin. Yep. And, he has to look at me and say, I'm capable.